Do you know that according to the Office for National Statistics, over 25 million people migrated to the Western countries between 2022 to 2024? And now out of these numbers, Africans made up of between 3 million to 3.5 million. Now let me ask you, are you among these figures? And if you are among these figures, what are your plans? Do you have a plan that one day you return back to your home country? If this is true of you, let me assure you, you are not alone. You see, millions of Africans who migrated to the Western world carries within them the hope of going back to their home country someday to contribute something meaningful. But two questions have troubled so many. They often ask themselves, what will I be doing if I get back to my home country? Will I be able to cope since I've been away for so many years? You see, this question alone have kept countless of African immigrants stuck year after year, unable to take that step. And here is the reality. Studies by African Development Bank, an international organization for migration, reveals that over 70% of Africans in diaspora whose dream of going back to their home country never actually do. Not because they don't want to go back to their home country, but because they fail to prepare with a clear plan to reintegrate themselves back in their home country. Well, some who finally moved back, they underestimated how much their home country have changed in the last 10 years. Some of the jobs and the skills that were valuable when they first left were no longer in demand. No wonder expert now says the most powerful thing you can take back to your home country, it is not money, it is knowledge. Let me share with you the story of one African gentleman. I want you to listen very carefully to this experience so that you can draw lessons from it. In fact, it took me almost 2 months to have him to open up about his experience. And this is exactly what I'm going to be sharing with you. And here is what he told me. He said, after arriving in the UK in 2002, he said he spent nearly 20 years working all sorts of menial jobs. Even though he was a master degree holder, he said he worked in factories, he worked in cold storage rooms, then he ended up in a mental care home, a place where every shift is highly unpredictable. He said month after month, most of his earning went into paying taxes and bills, but he confessed that he hated every single job he did. None of them brought him joy. None of them gave him a sense of fulfillment. Every day, he felt as though he was wasting his talent. You know, that constant feeling of being trapped like a slave to the system made him to start searching for an alternative. What he truly wanted was independence, the freedom to control his own time while making a real impact in the society by doing what brings him happiness. So the idea of moving back to his home country began growing strong in his heart. With some savings in his hand, he believed that it is time to go back home, even though it was a tough decision. While he was still thinking over it, something terrible happened. One of his co-workers, who also happened to be an African, suddenly passed away. He said that man has spent his entire life working at the same company. He was only 2 years away from retirement, 2 years away from finally receiving that pension that he had worked decades for. But sadly, he never lived to enjoy it. He said for the period he knew this man, he was always described as a very hardworking man. He was so valuable to the company that they would often beg him to come to work during holidays. And yet, only 2 days after his passing, the company advertised his position, and within days, he was replaced. He said he kept asking himself, is this how quickly one can be forgotten? Is this what decades of sacrifice can amount to? That moment became his breaking point. He knew he could no longer spend the rest of his life tied to a system that would replace him overnight. So he began making serious plans to return back home. A few months later, he finally packed his bag and he moved back home. At first, it felt like freedom, another chance to do enjoyable work while making an impact. But within weeks, he began to notice how much his home country have changed. Things were worse than when he left 20 years earlier. He still convinced himself that this is his country and he has no other place, so he stayed behind. But then come the harder part. What will he be doing for a living? He explored different business ideas, yet every option came with serious challenges. But meanwhile, his savings were going down fast because the prices of everything has gone so high up. So one day, his cousin visited him and told him about a haulage business. The way his cousin spoke about this business, it sounds so good that all the figures he was mentioning were all making sense. He said all he needed to do is to buy 2 tipping trucks at the cost of £15,000 each, that there are already companies that are already on ground to hire all those trucks. In fact, they will make payment every 2 weeks in advance. And the good part is that he said the company will be the one to handle the maintenance of the vehicles. To him, it sounds very perfect, even though it will take up to 95% of his total 20 years of savings. He felt it was worth it since the return on investment looked good. After doing some checks on the company, he decided to take the plunge and invested in it. After purchasing the vehicles and completing all the paperwork, the first 2 weeks, payment came as promised. But soon after, problem began. Payment became inconsistent, yet the vehicles were working day and night. When he asked why, he discovered that his cousins and the driver had been secretly using the vehicle for another job without this knowledge. So he stepped in, he took direct control of the vehicles and handed them himself to the construction company. He thought that would solve the problem, but within weeks, the company also began defaulting on payments. Worse still, the trucks, after only a few months, were already in terrible condition. Not knowing what else to do, he decided to sell them. But by then, their value had dropped so badly that the only offer he received were close to scrap prices. The vehicles he bought for £30,000, he had to sell them for less than £4,500. He was left broken and defeated. So he took what little money was left and he booked the next flight and back to the UK. He had to start all over again. It was hard. Not only was he back to the very job that he once hated, but he was older now. The strength he once had was gone, and the jobs themselves were fewer and harder to get. His dreams of freedom was crushed. The very purpose for which he returned home was completely defeated. So why do we share this experience? We do not share this story in order to discourage anyone from moving back to their home country. Instead, it is a lesson in the pitfall to avoid. So if you are planning to return to your home country, here is the truth that you must face. Look at a country like Nigeria. They spend over $10 billion every year importing food, despite having fertile ground. Someone who learned something like a modern farming or food processing could build wealth while solving a national problem. Look at across East Africa. Renewable energy is exploding and it's creating millions of jobs, but trained professionals are in scarce supply. Do not let frustration or emotion drive your decision to move back. Just as moving to the Western world requires careful planning, returning back to your home country demands proper planning too. Money alone is not enough to sustain you, but you must acquire knowledge which will make you become valuable to the society. Knowledge that will make people look for you rather than you looking for people instead. Let's take, for example, if the gentleman had invested in himself by learning modern farming techniques like pig farming, fish farming, and vegetable farming and their value chain, he would have used that same knowledge to impact the life of people back home and also enjoy freedom. You see, in Africa, food is in high demand, and providing value in food production will be a game changer. And also research before you invest. Jump into a business just because they sound good is dangerous, especially the transport business. Transport business always look good on paper, but in reality, it is full of trap. Avoid businesses you don't have control over. Do not invest in a business you don't clearly understand. Avoid ventures where you depend completely on others before you earn. Instead, focus on value-based businesses where you have real control. Seek advice from trusted people with genuine experience. Gather information before committing your resources. Rushing into unfamiliar businesses can turn your early excitement into a regret. As you know these days, it is very easy to lose money, but it's very hard to make it. I hope you find value in this video. And if you have watched this video up to this time, I want to say thank you. And I'll see you in the next one.